What was, hands down, the worst day of your life? The day my little sister died. She and I attended the same university. She was a freshman, and 3 years behind me, and our parents lived several hours away, so she listed me as one of her emergency contacts. One rather ordinary, otherwise unremarkable afternoon, she was running late for one of her classes and tripped while running down a staircase. The university PD and hospital immediately reached out to me and my parents. They told me she was alive, but that I needed to hurry. I did, but she was already gone by the time I got to the ER. I vaguely remember the doctor explaining the basal skull fracture, telling me that it was a 1 in a million fall, offering his condolences, asking if she was a donor. I vaguely remember sitting there for hours, numb, just waiting for my parents to arrive. I clearly remember, but wish I could forget, the look on my parents' faces when they walked through the door, at a moment when there wasn't a single doctor around, and I had to tell them both that their little girl was gone. That's not a conversation that any 20-year-old should ever have. That's not an agony that anyone should ever have to inflict on their own parents. That will always be the worst day of my life. Because if there's anything worse ahead, I really don't want to live through it. My wife was driving myself and our 3- and 4-year-old home after a birthday party. A drunken teenage girl blew through an intersection and hit us going at what was estimated to be 75 miles per hour. I suffered a TBI, several broken bones, and a whole host of other issues. I woke up several days later to find I was the only member of my family to survive the accident. My daughter made it to the hospital, my wife and son were gone before the ambulance arrived. That'll rock your shit for life. I was taking care of my 34-year-old cousin who was at the last days of his life due to a very rare and aggressive cancer. Towards the end, he refused morphine or laying in bed, he stayed conscious on a recliner. He was in a lot of pain breathing, so he chewed on ice a lot, and one day we ran out, so I rushed to a convenience store a few blocks away to buy more ice. I was in ugly pajamas and my curly hair was in a very frizzy ponytail, but I didn't care about the way that I looked. I wanted to help reduce his pain ASAP. On my way out of the store, a man told me to make myself more presentable in public. I got back to my cousin's house and he was dead. When my girlfriend died 10 days after being diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Edit, this happened 15 years ago and it honestly feels like another lifetime at this point. But now that I'm revisiting the memories, the worst day probably wasn't actually the day she died, it was either the day her parents, sister, and I talked to her for, we didn't realize, the last time, 'cause she was so scared and everyone was so upset, but at least we still had hope. So the worst was probably the next day when the pain got so bad they had to drug her unconscious and put her on breathing assistance and we knew we'd never talk to her again. My newborn son had just been life-flighted to a children's hospital hundreds of miles away, dying. Meanwhile, I get a call from a sibling informing me that my father just had a massive stroke, maybe dying, and can I come home to say goodbye, 3,000 miles away. I stayed with my son, but having to choose between the two was simultaneously the easiest and hardest decision I've had to make. In the end, both lived. My son is now wrapping up an engineering degree and hopes to be a military aviator. My dad never fully recovered but did come a long way. Eventually another stroke led him to heaven. I've had some pretty lousy days, even knocked on death's door a few times, but that was probably my worst day, so far. Edit, I forgot to mention, while staying at the Ronald McDonald House next to the Children's Hospital, my gallbladder began malfunctioning, leaving me on the floor in a fetal position until the pain went away. Put off the operation too long, until after baby was home. That was a whole other mess as the operation did not go well at all. Probably the day my parents' marriage imploded. I guess my dad found deleted pictures my mom deleted, one being of her kissing another man. He flipped the laptop screen to show me, a 12-year-old, I am 28 now, my mother's betrayal. Of course, this didn't just happen out of nowhere. There was prior contentions. Still, this was the day I feel like I lost my family, we had to sell the house in the divorce, so along with that I lost my community ECT. I never truly recovered from this. July 25, 2020. I started preparing my dog's dinner and placed it into his dish. Normally he'd be right beside me and would start scarfing it down immediately, but this time he wasn't. I turn around to see him staring directly into my eyes before he teeters over and bangs into my bed. He was having a stroke. His health had been on the decline for the last several months. He was having serious breathing problems in his sleep. Found out he had a partially paralyzed larynx and an elongated soft palate, so I took him in for surgery to have it corrected. He couldn't have the surgery because the anesthesia almost made his heart stop. His arthritis had also gotten so bad that he couldn't even walk around the block anymore. After seeing him consistently struggle for the last 5 or 6 months, the stroke was unbearable to watch. I held him on his bed and called the emergency vet. Had him put down later that evening. I still think about him every day, and as much as I'd love to get another dog, I'm still not ready.